Hello, I'm Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast, and I have a good friend and familiar face on the show today to talk about an exciting project that he's embarking on. And I'm so excited because I want to get a copy of this book and read it for my own well-being. But James Miller, welcome back to, I say back because you are a repeat guest on the show. Welcome back to the Living Undeterred podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate you allowing me to be a guest on your show today. Thank you.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I really admire the work you do, and I don't know what box to put you in. In other words, you're kind of a renaissance man. It's like you're a licensed psychotherapist, you're a radio host, you are a musician, and now you're going into this area of being an author. And today we're going to specifically focus on a new project, a new book that you have coming out. And I don't think the timing could be any better for what your book
Yeah.
represents. So I guess maybe for people who are new to my show and don't know much about you, maybe a little backdrop about you, what your why is, where you've been, where you're going, and then we'll kind of just segue into your book project.
Oh, great. I appreciate you allowing me to use your platform to talk about my book. So, as you know, I'm James Miller. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I've been in the mental health field for over 25 years. I have worked in every setting you can think of. And it's really taught me a lot, not only about how to help people, but obviously about my life as well. I made a huge change in 2015 and left my private practice and said, I want to do something different. I want to do something where I am feeling even more fulfilled within myself. And I want to just kind of tap into all the different interests and talents that I have. So in 2015, I moved to Florida and started Lifeology. And so I started on a YouTube channel. For 6 months, every single day, I did a YouTube episode practicing my craft again. When I was younger, I was in a lot of television and film. And so I was like, well, I want to practice this again. So did a lot of that. Then I went to a podcast and then went to a national radio show. And I've been blessed to be heard by millions of people. And it's incredibly humbling. But the main reason why I do what I do, and I'm sure just like all of your listeners as well, is I want to make a difference. I don't care who knows me. I mean, that's, whatever my reputation is, but it's more about just trying to be kind to people and letting people know there's always hope, regardless of how painful life is. And we've all been there before, regardless of how overwhelming it can be, there's always hope. And when we know that, that creates the platform of saying, if there's hope, then maybe my life today doesn't necessarily have to be the way it is. How can I look at something a little bit different? And when I look at something a little bit different, that allows me to say, this may happen, this circumstance may be here today, but it doesn't mean tomorrow it will be that way. And so with a slight shift, it starts to help us look at, well, what if? And it starts us to help us to dream again and to focus on something in the direction we want our life to go, as opposed to the despair that we might feel right now in the moment.
Yeah, there's such a deterioration of, I would say, people's, quality of life, their well-being, let's say.
Yeah.
Maybe it's mostly a self-perceived issue because maybe their
Mhm.
life isn't as bad, as they think they are. But if you look at just some of the things that are going on the negative press and in
Mhm.
some of the recent, even the school shootings, and you have to
Yeah.
think about the mental health fragility of it right now. And so self-help books, there's thousands of them. There's so many of
That's
them. You
right.
walk into the airport and they're everywhere. They have their own little category. So why
Mhm.
is your book, and let's tell me the title of your book and how
Sure.
you came up with that. We got to talk about the title of it, but and how you came up with it, and then why would I pick James Miller in his book?
Thank you. The name of my book is Life Lessons. You are the expert on your life. And the reason why it's called that is because, once again, like you said, so many self-help books out there, fantastic. But when we're struggling in the moment, I haven't, and I'm not saying there's anything out there, but I haven't found a book that simply says, when you are blindsided by life here, or when you feel like there's no hope here, this book specifically focuses on these mini chapters that gives you the
Mhm.
ability to find a framework, and then it helps you reflect on where you were in your past, how you felt this feeling before. If you felt the feeling before, what'd you do that was healthy for you to move beyond it or to give you a little bit of perspective? And what'd you do that did not work? So this is actually a
Mhm.
workbook as well. So once again, Life Lessons, you are the expert on your life, a workbook. And so in that, it really helps you create the foundation and the framework to look at your own past. And then with that, the prompts that I give you gives you the insight to say, okay, this moment is so overwhelming, but this is what I can do to take my next breath and to figure out my next plan.
I really like this angle because I think a lot of motivational speakers and life coaches, they're trying to bring to the table maybe new things, maybe a new
Mhm.
way to look at things. You're
Mhm.
saying, you've done these things. you've conquered things in 7th grade and 10th
Yeah.
grade and in college, and you can go back and you can revisit those opportunities that you had when you were undeterred or persevering or
Hmm.
resilience, and you have it inside of you. And that's a little
Yes.
bit different approach than a lot of the self-help books that are almost in your face, like here's your 5 steps to fix your life.
Hmm.
And those things are all over the place. And then I
Yeah.
saw your short synopsis that you provided to me, and I looked through and I thought, well, this is just a little bit different approach because we're really looking inwards to
Hmm.
fix our situation versus looking
Yeah.
outwards, right?
A lot of times we think, when life blindsides us, something happens and it's a new experience we've never experienced before, that can become so overwhelming that we don't know what to do. And the reality is you probably don't. But if you can reflect on what emotion am I feeling right now? Or what thought am I having right now? And so when
Hmm.
you can bring it down to the smallest increment or component, if you're feeling grief, well, I felt grief before. When did I feel grief before? Let me think about that. And when I felt that,
Hmm.
what did I do to help work through that grief? What were the things that worked for me? What were the things that did not work? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel in that respect. So you can focus on the emotional struggle you have. That's where the reflection comes in. That reflection brings implementation in the moment, which then allows you to find perspective and to find out what's the healthiest thing for you to do next. Because when that emotion is too overwhelming, we don't know what to do.
And one of the things I struggle with when I love reading, self-help books, motivational stuff. I need it as much as any other person to just stay focused, stay motivated. But when you're looking at options that are available, I
Mhm.
think sometimes the things that come from within are the most genuine and the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
authentic. And I use it. I talk about substance abuse and addiction, and if you force someone to go to, say, a rehab facility versus them going on their own free will, there's a certain
Mhm.
difference of how effective that is. And so I
Yes.
think if you're looking at improving your life and you try to find these methods internally, I think
Mhm.
there's something about that maybe being a little more effective, because what happens with me, James, is I go to these things, I listen to them, and then nothing happens. There's like no
Yeah.
action steps. And so
Mhm.
yours being a workbook, I think is a great idea that you've decided to do instead of like a memoir. Instead of writing a
Yes.
book about your
Yes.
struggles and kind of like what I did in my book, it's more of a memoir. It's not a
Uh-huh.
textbook. It's not a workbook.
Sure.
So I'm really intrigued on how you designed the workbook, how you broke down I know you have 9, is it 9 chapters or 9 segments or
Great question. 9 categories are in the book. There's actually
categories?
40. Yeah, there's over 40 chapters in this book. So the 9 categories, I'll read them real quickly for your listeners, is when your
And I have
emotions
one I want
overwhelm.
to talk to you about that caught my eye, but I want you to go through
Okay,
yours.
sure.
Go through them first, and I
Perfect.
want to pull you back later.
Okay, awesome. All right. So the categories are when your emotions overwhelm you, improving your
Okay.
communication, blindsided by life, improving your relationships, moving on with life, life lessons, identifying self sabotage, creating your future, and tackling the holidays. So all of those
Mm.
9 categories have multiple chapters within them, and then within the chapters has the workbook prompts in there as well.
So is there an order in here in regards to how grieving and maybe dealing with these things, like you I'm sure your chapters aren't random, but I mean, what's the thought process when you're putting this together? I mean, like, I know there's the stages of grief. There's all these, it seems like there's these
Mhm.
orders out there. Did you
Sure.
design your book with that in mind?
In some sense, I did. I more in the sense of when I wrote this, I was focusing more on in the moment, more of the categories. And so I know with all the people I've worked with all throughout all these years, I was really thinking about what are the categories or what are the struggles that people have. And so that's where I created the 9 categories. So it's not necessarily in the order of something. So when you read it, you can go to that category and say, well, I'm struggling right now with how do I move on with my life? What does that look like? And so those
Hmm.
chapters that I have in there are specific for that. And those are put in the order of what makes sense. So it goes from different aspects of the understanding of something to the activation of something. So the very
Hmm.
first chapter, excuse me, is called the first category is when your emotions overwhelm you. And that specific one is called radical acceptance. So, radical
Hmm.
acceptance is a really fancy SAT word that really focuses on the concepts of life overwhelms me. And when it overwhelms me, what do I do? I don't have to focus
Hmm.
on what was. So, I simply say, these are the facts as they are. I remove all the emotions from it. I don't like what happened. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's fair. It doesn't allow the person to be off the hook. But these are the facts. And when I look at that, then I'm able to say, okay, this is here and it hurts. What do I do with that? So that's where the quote, um, life. Oh my goodness, I just forgot the quote. Trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional. And that's a whole concept of what radical acceptance is. Trouble is going to
Hmm.
happen in our life, but misery or
Right.
the suffering is optional. We don't have to get lost in the grief of something. And when that happens, when we do get lost in it, all of a sudden that's where we don't know what to do. And when we don't know what to do, that's when every negative thought that comes into life happens. That's where we have what's called emotional forecasting, which is the second or third chapter in the book. Emotional forecasting is essentially where you take your emotional snapshot right now. So you have a devastating loss of something. You feel it, it consumes you, it permeates every cell in your body. And so when you think about your future, whether that's tomorrow, whether that's a year, whether that's 5 years from now, that then becomes your life. I feel this right now, so it must be true, and this must be how my life is going to be. And unfortunately, when you have that emotional forecasting, that's when all of a sudden despair literally sets in, and you feel like this is my past, this is my present, and this is how we'll always be. But
Hmm.
that's not necessarily the truth. And so radical acceptance allows a person to accept the facts as they are, to not get lost in the grief and suffering, and to focus on this and say, what can I do right this second, as opposed to having to focus on my future that I don't yet know.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. When I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor
Hmm.
Frankl,
Viktor
he
Frankl.
had suffering is my opportunity. I
Hmm.
rephrased it for me, pain is unavoidable, suffering is a choice. So
Yeah.
that's very similar
Yes,
to
it
what
is.
you said. And I think chosen suffering, I think there's even a book out called that, Chosen Suffering,
Mm,
where,
that sounds great.
pain happens, not much you can do about it, like you said, but
Hmm.
we really choose our misery. We choose our suffering
Yes,
to an extent. I mean, if you have stage 4 cancer, you really
of
can't
course.
do much with choosing that type of suffering. But
Hmm.
I want to,
But the difference, though, in that, if I may say, is there's a
yeah,
difference
yeah,
between physical suffering versus emotional suffering. So
good point.
every morning, I always tell people, well, when I work with people, I would say create two emotional scales, two scales in the morning. When you wake up, scale 10 is the best you feel, and one's the worst you feel. So those two scales are this. When I wake up, I can say physically, what scale am I at? So if I wake up and I'm doing pretty well, let's say I'm feeling like a level 8. But if I wake up and I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, I may be like at a level 3 for my emotions. So the difference is my emotions may be low, but my body is high. So my suffering may
Mm,
be at my emotional standpoint, but that becomes a choice. Now the physical
right.
aspect, we can't choose that amount of suffering, but we can understand how the physical pain influences us. If I don't get a lot of sleep or my body's aching, then yes, that's going to affect my emotions. But when I can differentiate between those two things and say, yes, this is what my body is feeling right now, I accept that. It hurts. I don't appreciate it. I don't like it, but I know that that's impacting my level of tolerance with people. I know that's affecting different aspects. And so when that's the case, we have that awareness and we can allow people to know I'm physically hurting. That probably is going to impact how we interact with you. But the difference is when it comes to the emotional struggle, that is our choice to determine how we're going to respond to people. Just because life feels a certain way is simply a feeling. There's what's called a thinking error. A thinking error is
Hmm.
essentially an emotional lens we use or a filter we use in how we look at the world. So one of those thinking errors, and that's in my book as well, is called emotional reasoning. I feel it, so it must be true. I feel angry, so I must be angry. You did
Mm,
something to me and it hurt my feelings, so therefore my feelings are hurt. Or
right.
I feel dumb, so I must be dumb. That's not the case. If you think something, that's your choice if that becomes your reality or not. So that's the same type of thing when it comes to emotional struggle or emotional suffering, is that becomes our choice. There's always a time to feel pain, appropriate time of grief, but once that appropriate time of grief is done, what do you do next? And that's where we decide if there's suffering or not.
Hmm. So, that's the actionable or the action item that you're thinking
Mhm.
about in the notebook is, you get people very focused on what you want to cover, and then you have steps in the notebook in your book to have
Sure.
people implement these things that you're talking about.
Yeah. So one thing I want people to know, it's a quick read. These each chapter is very short. There's only 2 to 3 pages of the chapter. So what it
Hmm.
does is it gives you a moment to look at something and say, I don't know what to do. This is a foundation. This is the nugget I need to focus on something. I was looking at the aspects of people's their ability to concentrate and to pay attention when things happen. Most people, when they're reading a self-help book, that's great, they want that self-development, but when you're in crisis, when I'm in crisis, I struggle with
Right.
reading a lot of things. I struggle with really retaining
Right.
that knowledge. So even the prompts, they're short. There's only 6 or 7 prompts. For example, the radical acceptance aspect of it, if I may read that real fast, those are very quick. um, if you're Let me see here. If you are currently struggling and need to use radical acceptance, I explain all of that in that chapter. Identify your current feelings and thoughts. So it allows people to slow their thoughts down, When you write your feelings out or your thoughts out, it's attached to a feeling. The feeling is then
Mhm.
attached to your action. The next one to describe when you felt the above emotions before, what happened for you. So now we're reflecting on what was in the past. So if you're currently struggling now with radical acceptance, let's reflect on a time in the past when you struggled with radical acceptance. And then allows you to focus on what were the emotions that you felt. What did you do that worked for you? What did you do that not work for you? So it works you through the present, goes to the past, then the actionable items of what you did, what that worked and what you did that did not work. And then from there it says, how can you implement that now? And so I give a different ideas of what that looks like. And then the next thing is, what'd you learn from this? What's your takeaway? How do you implement this moving forward? So it's like I said, the chapters are very short but very concise in the prompts that allow you to focus on the moment. Once again, when life does overwhelm us, we simply need
Mhm.
a direction. And that's what this book does, is it really give a direction for someone who's struggling in the moment.
Possibly you answered my question I was going to ask, because I, right now, with what I'm doing with my projects, and I'm sure you can
Mm-hmm.
relate to this, I get overwhelmed,
Yes.
and I get, personal, business, family things, health. I want to get my workouts in every day, and there seems to me like there just isn't enough day. I just
Mm-hmm.
run out of time, and then I get
Yeah.
I get I get sloppy. I make mistakes. I forget to, yesterday I did something that I literally never do. I missed a online Zoom meeting that
Mm.
I had on my schedule for a month, and
Oh,
I have
goodness.
no excuse for it. I have no excuse for it. So
Mm.
I'm gonna basically try to get some free advice from you for the next minute or two.
Sure.
But
That's
how
fine.
do you get someone who's a type A personality, who's attention deficit, and is in love with what they're doing, but they feel massively overwhelmed? I mean, what do you say
Mhm.
to someone like that? And not that I'm afraid I'm going to lose my desire. I don't think I could
Oh, of course
possibly
not.
do
Yeah.
that.
Well, just trying to
But
manage
how
everything as
do
well.
yeah, how do I? That's a good word. How do I manage? How does someone like that? I won't say it's me. I'm asking for a friend. how does someone how does someone like that manage their chaotic life?
One thing I think most people think is struggle with is when life is so overwhelming, it's literally the basics. I know for me, if I'm incredibly overwhelmed, I have to plan on when I go to sleep. I have to plan on when I'm going to wake up. I have to plan on when I'm going to shower. I'm going to plan on when I eat.
Hmm.
And so the basics is one of the most important things. Sleep, people don't realize that is a foundation for success. If you do not have sleep, your life is not going to go in the direction you want to go. So that is the primary aspect of it, is when you're unconscious, when you're sleeping, that actually rejuvenates you in a lot of ways. So what I would say to that is, you have to make sure your primary needs are being met. The primary needs are your health, excuse me, your sleep, your diet, and your hydration. Those are the main
Hmm.
things you have to have. And so if we don't plan that in, everything else is not going to work. And so it's not some magic formula, but you have to make sure those things are met. And if they're not met, then everything else is going to be sloppy, if you will, because we just don't have the building blocks for success. And that those building blocks are that the sleep, the hydration, and the eating.
So it sounds like what you just said there is one of the two, or one of the three pillars of what I like to call, for me, the living undeterred mindset. And
Hmm.
one of them is expectations. I want to have you put
Yeah,
that in a box for a minute, because I want to come back to
sure.
that. But the second pillar is preparation, and you just talked about that. So I'd like to see what you think on preparation, because I know for me it's meditation.
Mhm.
It's reading my podcasts, and one item for me that's very important is avoiding toxicity, because I
Mhm.
think that whether that's TV or negative friends or whatever, that prepares me for the inevitable, life throws at you. So I want you to talk about preparation a little bit, kind of how that is discussed in your book, or maybe in what you do with
Mhm.
people you work
Mhm.
with. And then expectations. I mean, seems like we have a set of unrealistic expectations as humans often, and we get very frustrated
Sure.
with things that seem to me are almost self-imposed, because our expectations are out of whack. So what's your thoughts on those two things?
Mhm. When it comes to preparation, one of the best ways for success is reverse engineer what you want. So if, like, today is what is today? Today's Thursday. So tomorrow,
Yep.
obviously, is Friday. So for so for tomorrow, I'm already planning what my day is going to look like tomorrow. So I reverse engineer that. So I reverse engineer the 24 hours from today, and I go to the when I'm going to go to sleep. So when I reverse engineer when I'm going to go to sleep, what does that look like before that, as I prepare to go to bed? What does it look like prior to that? And I work each event back. And I know for some people, they think, James, that's so rigid. But the difference is it's not about the rigidity of it. It's about the preparation for that because I know what to expect. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with having downtime. In fact, I build in downtime to my schedule. I don't even have to know what I'm going to do for my downtime because I can say, well, for the next 3 hours, it's going to be downtime. When that time happens, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't have to figure all that out. But the point is, when you can be that structured, it allows you to keep your life in order. As we know, the
Mhm.
opposite of order is chaos. And so,
Right.
without some form of structure or with some type of formula or some type of um, schedule of some sort, our life is not going to be manageable. So when we can build in, when do we have our sleeping? When do we have our eating? I know for me, when I get incredibly overwhelmed, like a couple weeks ago or this past week, I had a lot of anxiety about something personal that happened. Just I was blindsided by something, and I was like, okay, I can't eat, and I'm the type of person if I can't eat. Or I have a lot of anxiety. I can't eat, but I will work out like you will not believe. And it's great, but I know that I have to eat. So those types of things,
Right.
when emotions do overwhelm us, what do you do? And this is what I asked myself, James, you felt this anxiety before. What do you do that works for you? What do you do that does not work? So I was able to plug and play what that looks like. So when I felt that anxiety, yes, I worked out a lot, but I said, I know I need to eat. So even though I didn't want to eat, I made myself eat. I'm not thirsty, but I know I need to drink water. And so those things are things you have to do when you do become overwhelmed. And so that's when it comes to preparation is life is going to happen all the time. When you can immediately identify the emotion that you're experiencing, reflect, just like it says in the book, what when did I feel this before? What did I do? So that's really what it boils down to. Preparation is we can't prepare for what life is going to give us, but we can prepare as much as we can for our day within the 24 hours. So success always comes from the implementation of something 24 hours in advance, reverse engineer it, and you'll find that you'll be more successful than you are today.
So, and that helps with the preparation. How about expectations? How can people get a set of realistic we seem to live in this video game mindset where we'll just, oh, we'll
Mhm.
buy a new life, or we'll just,
Sure.
it's almost like a matrix or not real life we live in
Sure. A
sometimes. So how
virtual
do you
world.
get people to
Hmm.
just look in the mirror and say, you know what, I know I'm not perfect.
Hmm.
My expectations are to be perfect, but I'm
Sure.
not. And so, talk about expectations a little bit. How people can get better at understanding how they can actually control what we do during our lives.
A lot of times people are so used to social media and so many different aspects of creating this perfect world. There's so many different filters people use, or in social media they have this incredible life. You're like, oh my god, I wish that would be true. In fact, I was thinking about that last night. I wish that was my life, or that is my life. And then once the camera's off, like, okay, well, right now,
Yeah,
irony of this,
yeah,
I just came home about an hour ago and I have water all over my floor. So here I am in my
yeah.
house, and yeah, I have a beautiful house here. Here's the ocean behind me, and right here underneath my sink, because I'm in my home, I'm not in a studio right now, I'm in my house. Underneath my sink, I have everything out because there's water here, and the plumber is going to come here right after the show. So the thing is, you
Right,
may see this, but this is what's happening, and I think that's when it
right,
comes to expectations. This is our ideal expectation. This is reality behind the camera right here. So a
yeah.
lot of it has to do with what are you able to say? Who am I really? Camera's off, the mic's off. I'm not on social media, whatever it might be. Who am I really? And when one of the exercises I actually have in my book, and I believe it's in the chapter called Forgiving Yourself, it's actually looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, I'm not saying look at your mirror, see how you look, but you actually
Mhm.
look into your eyes. And as you start to talk to yourself, you'll see that there's something different there. I know for me, when I have to forgive myself, and I'm no different than anyone else, it happens all the time. When I talk to myself and I honor myself, and I can say, James, you are such a loving, kind, generous, noble, beautiful, intelligent man. And whatever I say to myself, I see that. And when I really look into my eyes with that, I find, and I'm sure many people who've done this as well, I actually blush because it's such an honor to be able to tell
Right.
yourself something that you truly believe. And in doing that, then I start to say, and you know what? This is what you're struggling with today. You tried really hard today, didn't work out. You did this, somebody did this back to you, or you did this. And so as I really talk to myself throughout the day and really focus in my eyes of what's going on, all of a sudden everything else kind of falls away. All of the pretense I have, all of the facade that I have starts to melt away. And that's when you really see who you are. Because if you can be honest with yourself, and I'm sure many people can, but it can be difficult. But the more you talk to yourself in the mirror, looking in your eyes, you'll find that things start to melt away. And when they melt away, you truly see who you are. And when you truly see who you are, that's when nobody Nobody's around you. What do you do with that information? So I can say, yes, James, this is how you want to be, but this may not be who you are. And so when it comes to the self compassion is one of the hardest things that people do. What we often don't realize is that we are an emotional abuser when we use those negative self talk. If I say, James, you're so ugly,
Mhm.
you're so stupid, I can't believe you did that.
Mhm.
I am being an emotional abuser. We all know what an emotional
Right.
abuser is. And we're like, I would defend someone, but we
Hmm.
do it to ourselves. And so with that emotional abuse, that's where we have all these expectations of, I should be this, I should be that. The reality
Right.
is I strive to be that, but I'm not even close to being that. So,
Right.
but when you can look at yourself, like I said, and have that self-compassion, and then as you say what you're struggling, and then you hold yourself accountable. James, you really struggled today. This is what you went wrong. This is what I need you to do right now. I need you to do this and this. And so as I start to talk to myself in that respect, it starts to build myself up. So you find compassion, you set the internal boundary. The internal boundary becomes the activation of what you do, and that's how you change your life. So I said a lot of things there, but it comes to the
Yeah.
preparation and it comes to managing expectations based on how you see yourself in the mirror. Literally.
And there's something about humility, and just
Mhm.
laughing at yourself and laughing at the situation. This morning I had to take the RV in at 7 o'clock in the morning to get some service work on it before we take off on our second stage. And my phone took me downtown Cedar Rapids,
Oh,
and I told the guy that I was going to be there at 7 because he was going to squeeze me in,
oh goodness.
way out of the way. I mean, for some reason, my phone took me down. I'm blaming my phone now, right? But I was too lazy to
I get it.
actually verify it was the right
Sure.
thing I put in. So I was half an hour late. And
Mm,
on the way there, I just started laughing. I just started
yeah.
laughing. And I thought, I can start my day off at 7:15, mad, angry,
Yeah.
drinking coffee in my RV, flying down the interstate, trying to find the guy's phone number because he's waiting for me. And I just started laughing out loud. And I think I just realized, my dad is sitting in the hospital.
Mhm.
Maybe his days are numbered.
Yeah.
And here I am sitting here going to get mad because I'm 15 to 20 minutes late going to an appointment when everything really should be so insignificant other than what my dad is going through. And so
Mhm.
it really put me
Yeah.
having that lens. And you talked about, reframing. I've heard you talk about reframing a lot.
Mhm.
For me to kind of reframe my turmoil I was in at the moment, I just realized how ridiculous it was for me to be mad.
Yeah.
And this guy's going to be fine when I get there. And sure enough, I got there and he didn't even know I was late. You
Oh
know,
goodness.
yeah. So,
Sweet.
so I mean, there's a little life lesson in there, James. Is that we
Mhm.
sometimes get so caught up on some little tiny things during our day that it ends up dictate, especially early in the morning, right? I
Mhm.
mean, isn't that the key that you don't want to fall
Yeah.
behind the emotional eight ball right out of the bat? I
Sure.
mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure you talk about that maybe in your book or maybe with you talk on your show about make sure that first 5-10 minutes of your day, you are
Yes.
going in the right direction, right?
Correct. How you start your day is indicative of how your day is going to go. If you start
Hmm.
your day continually hitting the snooze button or not really preparing for your day. So once again, there's nothing wrong if you hit the snooze button, but if you know you need to be up at a certain time, then set your alarm a couple hours earlier. Then you can hit the snooze button. So you are
Hmm.
able to meet that need of the snooze button. But you want to make sure that you are very specific and intentional when you wake up. If you wake up in a day, and maybe it's different for the weekends, but if you wake up during the day and you don't set your intention for improving all aspects of yourself. So I look at this as your spirit, mind, and body. People can call it whatever they want, the id, ego, super ego,
Right.
whatever, however you want to quantify it, which is totally fine. The way I do that though is I know during the day I get to use my intellect. Sometimes I'm pretty smart, sometimes not so much, but I get to use my intellect. And then the physical aspect is something I make sure I do every single day because for me, I have to do something physical. And so if I don't do something physical, that when anxiety or whatever hits me, all of a sudden that's going to creep up in my body. So if I, just like your metabolism, if I do something early in the morning for me, for the physical aspect of it, I know that throughout the day, my body and heart rate's already going. So when the anxiety hits or depression, or I'm just shocked by something, my body is
Hmm.
already taking that energy and it'll use it as metabolism and burn it off. Because as we know, when emotions happen, thoughts create emotions, emotions create how our body responds. That can be through your
Hmm.
heart rate increasing. That can be through a spike of adrenaline, whatever that might be. But if I've already built my body up during the day or in the morning to be a machine, if you will, so when those adrenaline spikes in or my heart rate increases more, my body automatically uses that as fuel to burn off calories, etc. So in burning off those calories, it decreases my emotional output, because the anxiety is now decreased. And so therefore I'm able to be more healthy. So I've used my intellect during the day, use my body in a healthy way. And then for me, my spirits or my soul, however you want to quantify that, I do something every morning that is very specific for me. So I always get up an hour before I'm supposed to do something for me. And then I focus my time and my energy on something that connects with my spirit, something for me greater than who I am. And so in that, that's where I find my strength. That's when life
Mm,
happens, and it happens to all of us. That's where I know every morning when I start my day that way, I know that my day is started off with in my spiritual connection, and then it goes to my body, and then it goes to my intellect. So when each of those are struggling, if my body's flagging, well, my spirit can say, all right, James, it doesn't matter what's going on, you got this, you're going to be okay with this. And then my intellect says, okay, yes, this is my cheerleader, you got this with your faith and you have hope. Now let's figure out what we're going to do. Or if my business is crumbling, my spirit says, James, you've been here before. What did you do before? You're going to overcome this. My body says, yes, let's go out there, literally go out there and figure out what we're going to do. Or if my spirit is flagging, I can say, okay, well, logically, things change. Things are influencing you. So if things have influenced you before, let's use your past data to say what happened. How did you increase your spiritual aspect of it? So all three things always work in tandem. So it's so important to say how you start your day is indicative of how your day is going to go. Because if you don't incorporate all three of those things every
mm,
single day, you'll find that, yes, you may be the smartest man alive, but you may have no hope. You may have no,
right.
don't have perspective, and whatever that might be. So you have to really say, when one part of my life increases, are the other two parts of my life increasing as well? And unfortunately, if people don't do that, they might find that they're not as living the most fulfilled life as they thought they were, or that they
I
thought
want
they
to
could.
jump on something you said early on in that conversation, in that answer, is you
Hmm.
said thoughts generate emotions. So
Hmm.
when you said that, I immediately went to, for me, meditation. So I meditate in the
Hmm.
morning because
Good.
I think that my thoughts, you're right, they will determine my emotions. And so it's not like I'm trying to control my thoughts, because I don't really think you can, but it's
Hmm.
more just being aware of their life expectancy. In other words, their
Yes.
impermanence, that a thought comes in, like I was in the RV this morning, I was angry, and I realized that that thought would die and go away. And so, like I said, going back to the first 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, for me, it's meditation. I have to do it in the morning. And I
Hmm.
get up a little early, like you do, maybe not an hour before, but I get up a little bit early so I can do my 10 or 15 minutes of meditation. But I want to jump back. I promised you I want to talk about one of your chapters.
Oh, it's fine.
Um,
This is
or
good.
not, I call them a chapter, but I think they're categories. I think
Category.
you
Sure.
say,
Uh-huh.
yeah, is the last one, tackling
Mhm.
the holidays.
Yes.
And the reason why that one grabbed out at me, and I don't know if I've even told you this, James, since the last time we talked, um, but I have discussed it publicly. But I had my first brush with what I would call suicidal ideation over
Mhm.
Christmas, which
Wow.
was just jaw dropping for me because I've written a book, I do a
Sure.
podcast, I talk to people like you every day, and it's like, how could this living undeterred guy that seems like I have everything together
Mhm.
from the perception of people watching me
Mhm.
could just go from here to here so fast over the holidays?
Yeah.
And it shocked me. It shocked me.
Mhm.
And I understood why it happened, and I can talk about that some other time. But the reason was I took shortcuts in my
Mhm.
healing.
Sure.
And so when I saw tackling the holidays, I thought, wow, I have to ask James, how do people get through? And I'm in a lot of Facebook chat groups of moms and
Mhm.
dads that have lost children, and these anniversaries comes up of their dates of their
Yeah.
death, and their heavenly birthdays, they're called, when they were born and
Mhm.
stuff. And it's like, how do you work through that? I mean, that is so hard for those parents that have lost, and it doesn't have to be a child. You could have
Sure.
lost your spouse.
Sure.
So I did that as well. But it's like, holidays are hard. Birthdays are hard. Anniversaries,
Okay.
Mother Days are hard. I mean, it's
Mhm.
actually every day is hard. You know,
Yeah.
how do you help me get through that?
Sure. Well, first off, I want to clarify when I said wow, when you said that, the reason I said wow was I appreciate your being forthcoming, because I
Sure,
know a
I
lot of
understand.
people hearing this right now are like, I've been there before. I've been there before myself. When life overwhelms me, I'm like, oh God, this is horrible. I don't want to do this
Hmm.
anymore. So there's a difference between passive thoughts and active thoughts. A passive thought is, if I don't wake up, I don't wake up. An active thought of self-harm or suicide is, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do. So
Mhm.
it's I want to normalize the fact that many people have very passive thoughts, and people can have those all every day. But the difference is,
Mhm.
once it becomes an active thought, that's when you of course need to speak to a licensed person like myself, or go to your nearest emergency room. But going back to the whole aspect of the holidays, yeah, they're incredibly difficult. One of the chapters is called Overcoming Your Holiday Blues. That's hard because we can all, when the holidays happen, I mean, um, my mom has a Hallmark Channel movie for Christmas. It's like not even during, I guess, Christmas in July. I mean, it's all the time. So that creates, once again, those expectations of, this is
Right.
amazing, this is how life should be. And the reality is, when you look here,
Yeah, you
everything's
got
out of
water in your
underneath
floor.
my,
That's how
yeah, got
life
water on my
is.
floor. That is what's happening in my life right now. So
Yeah.
the reality is it can be very painful. It creates all of these nostalgic feelings and emotions that can just be so raw and so painful. One of the things I do is actually walk you through, when the holidays come up, the preparation for that. What does that look like on the day of? What do you do? How do you not get lost in what was? Because what was will always be better than what is, and what is right now is so painful. So with that
Mm.
particular chapter of Overcoming Your Holiday Blues really focuses on what to do, because I know, as someone who has celebrated the holidays alone, it can be very lonely. And so
Yeah.
to prepare for that, and what that looks like is, okay, and the day of, let me plan my schedule out as much as possible. So
Mm.
what time am I going to wake up? If I'm going to go to the gym, what time did I go to the gym? Let me prepare the menu. What kind of food do I want to have throughout the day? What kind of movies do I want to watch? What kind of activities do I want to do? What kind of what are things I can do that keep me focused in the moment? Because without structure in that moment, without any schedule, we will focus on everything we lost. Because once again, what was where our joy was, and what is in the moment that feels like there's no joy. So to be kind to yourself, you have to really plan out that day way before it even happens, and stick with that schedule. And in doing that, it keeps you focused on the moment, as opposed to, once again, the sadness of what was.
I really, 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 really like that because I know for me when anniversaries come up or things come
Mm-hmm.
up, and I look at my schedule like the next day, and let's say it's the anniversary of Seth's death, which is October 4th. In the past, you know, I didn't really want to plan a lot of things because I kind of wanted to reflect. I kind of wanted to honor
Yeah.
him. But then what I ended up doing, James, is just got lost in thought. And I just
Mm-hmm.
got lost in memories, which almost all were, even though they were happy, very fleeting, they were painful. And then
Yeah,
I would just
they
get,
were.
and then I would go from 1,000 to zero, just, I mean, literally, or 0 to 1,000, just so fast. But I think if going forward for me, I'm going to heed your advice or your guidance, and I'm going to make sure that my days are full because you don't have
Yes, you have to.
time to be sad if you're busy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's hard to
Yeah.
be like you and I talked for an hour here today. We're going to, I can't be sad, right? Because I'm talking to you,
Mm-hmm.
or I can for a little bit, but
Sure.
if I'm sitting there on my couch looking out my window or looking over at a picture of his graduation, you know, and this weekend will be tough because it's graduation, and I always think about my
Mm-hmm.
son wearing his
Sure.
orange and black graduation gown. It's that picture's in my book, and it's going to be a tough weekend for me. But you know, I'm going to prepare. I'm going to stay busy, and I'm going to really try to stay in that zone, that sweet
Mm-hmm.
spot. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to allow myself time to think about Seth,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
Because one thing, James, I wanted to, I know with my attention deficit, I tend to just
No, I
drift, but
follow you.
I have to
I'm
ask you
following you.
about this. I have to ask you about this because this is one of the things that probably irritates me the most in these clubs of grieving parents and, or maybe your spouse died, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Is this get over mentality, this get
Mm-hmm.
over mindset.
Yeah.
I want to call BS on that because I think it's just setting us up for disaster. And it's no different for
Yeah.
me than someone who maybe is sober and they talk about how many days they've been sober in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that because I think that just sets yourself up for that one time that you decide to be a human being and you slip up and you have a drink. Now you torture
Yeah.
yourself. And so for me,
Yes.
it's like, um, I don't know. I need to be very, anyway, I just thought I'd ask you that. I asked you
No,
what your thoughts are on
great
that.
questions. I have three parts to that. So the first part is, it's so important for someone not to memorialize an event, or in other words, a date. When someone memorializes a date, now there's a difference between the holidays. I mean, yes, an anniversary can be of anything you want it to be. But if you know that that particular date causes a lot of grief for you, if I may, for Seth on October 4th,
Mhm.
when a person, actually, I'll speak with my mom. So as I told you in the pre-call, my father passed away
Right.
January 13th of 2010, and when I really talked with my mom about in 2011, January 13th, if she memorialized that date and would say on that date of 2011, she would get lost in the grief. And what
Yeah.
happens is when we re-traumatize ourselves when every time the anniversary date comes up, because when you think of something, when you think of a memory, a very traumatic memory, and you will relive it. So then you actually relive the trauma from the first time you thought of it. So on January 11th, if she lived in that moment, excuse me, January 2011, if she relived that, she's now re-traumatizing herself to when she got the news that my father passed away. And then 2012, if she were to do that as well, she's re-traumatizing. So every time a date comes up where someone has passed, if you memorialize that date, you then create the expectation of that loss again, which
But
unfortunately
why do we
reopens
do
that
that?
wound.
I mean, it's
Unfortunately,
because it
because
seems.
we yeah. Unfortunately, we as
Go
humans
ahead.
are trained. We've trained ourselves that we have to think in sequence. That's why we have 60 minutes in an hour. We have 60 seconds
Mm.
uh, in a minute. And so 365 days in a year, we train ourselves of when it comes to sequences. And so we've taught ourselves that this date something happened. Everybody has a type, what's called a circadian rhythm. It's fancy terms we don't need to know, but everyone has a rhythm of their day, rhythm of when they're
Mm.
most productive, when the rhythm of when they're most tired. And so when rhythms happen, those rhythms actually happen when it comes to seasons. They happen throughout the year. And so what we do is when a rhythm happens, we've created a snapshot in our life of an event that happened in that year. And so then that rhythm happens again the next year. We start to prepare ourselves for that loss because that emotion was so powerful for us that that's what creates that rhythm. And so when that rhythm happens, that's why we train ourselves that we have to memorialize an event. So when a person memorializes an event, and there's nothing wrong with thinking about the person and grieving that person, the difference is you have to use your logic in this respect to say, all right, so January 12th, my father was alive, and then January 14th or 13th, he passed away. So if the following year, if January 12th came along, okay, well, he wasn't dead, January 13th, that's the anniversary date. What we do is if we all of a sudden think of it like it just happened again, what's different between January 12th and January 13th of the next year? Nothing's different. And so
Right.
what happens is you have to remove that. So therefore you can grieve throughout the whole year, but if you make that 1 week or that one day so much
Yeah.
more full of grief, then you compound
Yeah.
it to such a degree that you re traumatize yourself to the initial moment of when it happened. So that's why I always tell
Mm.
people grieve throughout the year. Don't allow that one date to then become the
I
time when
love
all
that.
your grief is experienced because you break down and it's so overwhelming. And that's when people feel like there's no hope, and that's when they emotionally forecast their life again to say, "This is how my life is going to be." I'm re-traumatized. I lose that I lose myself in that loss, and that unfortunately is so painful. So as you read this book, Life Lessons, you are the expert on your life. That is something I really help people realize: is you can't get lost in the memory of something, because in doing that, that's where you re-traumatize yourself and you feel that pain over and over and over again. So when you grieve every single day. Don't limit it to one moment or only feel it so much, because unfortunately in doing that, it causes you to stumble and takes you a lot longer to get back on track again.
That's one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. I'm serious, man. This just hit me so hard because not only can I do this to help me, but
Yeah.
these some of these parents that I know that are just unbelievable human beings because of their
Mhm.
advocacy. They've taken
Sure. Yeah.
the suicide of their son or daughter. They've taken the drunk driver that killed him, or the cancer or whatever that they did that
Hmm.
lost a loved one. And they've you're right. They've taken these certain days, and like in
Yeah.
this club I'm in with the deceased child, this heavenly birthday thing's very popular, where people will
It's
post,
beautiful.
here's their heavenly. And see, I Seth's 28 to me. I don't have a heavenly
Hmm.
birthday. He died at
Hmm.
23, and I just think that in my
Hmm.
mind he's 28 this
Sure.
year. He's just not here, but he's
Hmm.
28, right? So, but I love this grieve throughout the year. You dice it up instead of one
Sure.
painful day.
Compartmentalize it.
Now well, I'm not saying 365 painful days, but you
Hmm.
break it down into more manageable days. And so really that explains my obsession with what I'm doing with my tour and my
Mm,
project, because I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to remember my wife and my son
yeah.
every day, and it's less painful for me than just
Hmm.
repressing, and then like a slinky
Yes.
take my hand off and it just goes boom right through the roof.
Hmm.
And then I sit there and I get, like I did back in Christmas time, I get, suicidal ideation. It's like, I
Hmm.
really like the way you presented that. I think that's something that I'll take away from our conversation today, that
Good.
as I talk to people every day, I'm going to start presenting this idea and do a little bit more research into this grieve throughout the year idea. I really, really like that. And that's really the first time I've really had somebody's probably said it to me, but they didn't explain it as well as you did.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And that's something my mom has even said, how that has helped her. So I mean, I'm not, I mean, anyone, any quote expert can explain this. But for me, that's something that I've really tried and helped. 'Cause when I saw my mom, who is obviously struggling so much, lost the love of her life, was able to recognize that. And so she's told so many other people who've lost
Hmm.
people as well with that. So that's something, I have to take into my own life. When something happens for me, I can memorialize any event. And that can be from the biggest thing to the smallest thing. It can be, let's say, um, someone went through a divorce. And so that
Yeah.
next week, it's been a week since I've been divorced. It's been a month since I've been divorced. It's been this.
Hmm.
And when
Yeah.
we,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever anniversary we use, that just re-traumatizes ourselves. There's no different from the day before than the day of or the day after when it comes to an anniversary date of trauma,
I love
unless
it,
you
man.
allow it
I
to be.
absolutely love it. I'm gonna have to write a blog on this. My
Here you
wheels
go,
are
do it.
spinning. I
Good.
love that mindset. Everything's mindset. You talked about
It is.
thoughts dictate your
Mm-hmm.
emotions, and I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people are driven by their emotions. They don't
Yes.
realize that what you think will drive your emotions. And they think
Yes.
that everything's just emotion based, and that's where people snap. And you have this mentality
Mm-hmm.
today, and you look at all the issues with people just doing horrific things,
Yes.
impulsively, going through a drive
Mm-hmm.
through, and they'll just get into a fight with somebody. It's like, and a lot of it is just their inability to understand that thought precedes action,
Yes.
and
A lot of
our
times people
ability.
think
Yeah, go
that.
ahead.
I totally cut you
No,
off.
no, good.
I'm sorry about that. A lot of times people, when you talk about relapsing, there's a difference between relapsing and lapsing. A person relapses, and that can be in anything. That's overeating, that can be in actual substance abuse, it can be in anything you want. But the relapse doesn't happen when you do the action. The relapse starts with a thought. For example, we've all seen a pizza commercial, or maybe I'm speaking for myself. I
No,
can see a pizza commercial and I'm like, oh, that looks good. I'm like, oh no, I don't eat that. And then maybe a couple days later, I happen to walk by and I see a pizzeria. I'm like, oh, that actually looks good. And then, a couple days later, I'm like, God, I'm really hungry. And then I'm like, oh, there's a Domino's right there, whatever, someone, whatever pizza
yeah.
company. And I'm like, I'm gonna get one. And so this instantaneous thing happened. So I get it. But so the action happened or the behavior happened when I ordered it and when I ate it. But the difference is the quote relapse happened with the first thought. The first thought begot another thought, which then got more influence and more influence. And then pretty soon I'm like, now I'm consciously entertaining that. Now I'm actually doing the behavior. So what's the most important thing is when you recognize what your thought structure is that leads a person to relapse or leads a person to doing something they don't want to do, that's when you have to catch it. It's so important to realize you can pull out a sapling from the ground, a baby tree, but you can't pull out a tree by itself. So as soon as you catch whatever that first thought is or that second thought is, you have to immediately say, James, you are focusing on this. That is not going towards the direction you want to go. What are you going to do? And what have you done in the past? Just like my book teaches you, what have you done in the past to stop that thought structure so it doesn't start to plant something and pretty soon you're now engaging in something that you know is not healthy for you.
Well, back to the book. I can't wait to read it. Are you going to do an audiobook version?
I am actually, and so it'll be my voice since I'm on the radio all the time. Yes, I am. By the time that the book actually launches, which is June 14, 2022, the it'll probably be a week or two before the audiobook comes out. But yes, there will be one very soon. Right now, it's on paperback and all electronic books as well. But yes, there will be an audiobook coming very soon as well.
And are you going on a book tour, or is this already starting your book tour, or kind of how do you plan on doing a lot of your promotion?
Sure. With everything going on post COVID, it's a little bit different. I mean, you're probably realizing more than I am as far as people showing up in the well, you are, I
Yeah.
know you are because of your tour, and so it's a little bit different. Specifically now, there's a new thing, something about monkeypox or something. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I saw that. Yeah.
Something's happening in the world, and so I know a lot of people are, of course, struggling with that too. So to answer your question, I have been blessed to be on a lot of fantastic shows like yourself, and I have a lot more shows than would be on. I have a huge publicity um, publicity stunt that's coming out.
It's your
So I'm
plumber
really happy
calling.
about that. All right,
It's your
well,
plumber
actually, I think it
calling.
is. That's hysterical. That should be Undisturbed.
You-
I think it is actually. But to answer the question, there's a huge publicity pitches going out, a press release that's going to all the major markets, all the big markets, small markets. That I'm really blessed that my PR team at Red Heifer Media has done a fantastic job in helping with that. So I'm very excited about that. So yeah, I get to meet so many people like you and just talk so many people as well. And so I'm always open to having listeners and viewers reach out to me at Instagram at James Miller Lifeology. Love to talk to as many people as I can, and just to instill hope that there's always hope, regardless of how difficult life may be.
Well, one of the ideas behind this whole nationwide tour that we're doing is to make it less about me and more about we,
Mm-hmm.
and to
Mm-hmm.
turn the spotlight on the individual, maybe the silo shops, the nonprofits
Mm-hmm.
that are out there, in the trenches every day. And so your book, the timing's perfect because you come out, you said June, what days it come out?
June 14th, just right after Father's
Yeah.
Day.
And we're going to run this
Pre-sales are
episode
Oh,
before.
perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent.
And
Well, pre-sales are actually May 31st to June 13th. Pre-sales are on Amazon. You can buy pre-purchase it. Anything after June 14th, you can buy any bookstore you want: Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, Amazon, anything you want. You can find it anywhere.
and we'll be able to help you promote your book on our tour as well. But I know when we come to
Oh, thank you.
Florida, which is your home state,
Hmm.
I'd certainly love the opportunity to maybe do an interview with you in the RV or something or whatever.
Oh, I
I know
love
we're going to
that.
be,
I love that.
yeah, we're going to be down in Fort Lauderdale. I don't remember when exactly, but it's on the third stage, I think. So, but
Okay.
just give an update on how the book's going, and
Oh, I would love
like I
that.
said, the timing just. I had someone once say to me, he said, Jeff, your timing on your tour couldn't be any better. And I feel that way about your book. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that our timing is good because
Yeah, I hear you.
I shouldn't be doing a tour. I shouldn't
Sure.
be out there talking to grieving parents. There's 800 people a day, James. Think about this. 800 people a day in America are dying from overdose,
Mm,
alcohol, and suicide. And
mm,
the issue with that statistic is we focus on the 800. How about the 8,000 that don't die?
yeah.
How about the
Yeah. Yeah.
20,000 that don't die? You don't think those families are torn apart? I watched my son go through a 6-year addiction struggle that didn't tear our family apart, but certainly damaged it, winged it.
Hmm.
And then my wife went
Yeah.
through a long, lengthy battle with alcoholism that affected everything, my marriage and everything. And
Sure.
so we tend to look at a statistic like 800 and we think, oh, that's sad, 800 families. I said, no, there's thousands and thousands of thousands every day that don't die, that have just
Yes.
maybe not just as much damage, but plenty of damage that can destroy families. So your book is right there, top of mind, perfect timing, unfortunately. And I'm honored to be able to have you talk about this on our show. And I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to help you continue promoting and talking about it. And I'd like to get you back on the show maybe sometime when we come down to see you guys in Florida in July.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. If I may say one more thing as well,
Yeah.
is there's what's called a dialectic, and that's one of the chapters in my book. A dialectic is a really a fancy term that everyone, I think, it's important that people realize it. So a dialectic is essentially you can have two opposing things exist at the same time. So you said it's unfortunate that you have to do this right now. Absolutely right. So the dialectic would be it's unfortunate that you have to do this, but it's unfortunate you have to do this, but it's true you have to do this. And so the
Hmm.
reality is it's sad, but it's also needed. And so both of those don't feel like they exist, but it's one or the other. So one or the other is essentially it can only be this or it can only be that. The difference is that when you are living a life where I have to choose this or I have to choose that, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So for example, you're at a funeral, and at a funeral, you're really sad, but then you focus on something like a happy memory, and all of a sudden you're really happy. So you're
Right.
like, I'm really sad, but I'm happy. And when that happens, you think, well, I can't feel both. I can't feel happy when I'm at a funeral. But the reality is you can. And so when you
Right.
know that that's possible, both things can exist. And so as a person is struggling with something, if I think I have to be mad at this person, but I also love this person, or I also have to this or that. And so when we live in a life of it's one or the other, unfortunately, we don't allow ourselves to be able to experience the fluidity of life, because I feel so many more emotions than just one. And so when people realize that we can hate someone but love someone, that's a dialectic.
Yeah.
Understanding how dialectics play out in one's life allows for a person to experience life at the fullest, as opposed to getting stuck in one, this or that. And in doing that, that doesn't allow for a person to see what their choices are. When they don't have the choices, then all of a sudden they think, I don't have any other options, it's only this. And they lose out on ways and how to understand how to grow and develop in their life. So that's my little takeaway there, is helping people understand that, to understand what a dialectic is, all the different ways in which many things exist at the same time to be 100% true, that allows a person to fully experience who they are as a person, and to understand life in a completely different way.
Well, listen, Life Lessons, You Are the Expert on Your Life is out soon. And I'm super excited to read it. And I'll do a book report for you on social media when I get done reading it.
Oh, I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that.
Hey, well, thanks being on the show today and enjoy our friendship. And best of luck with everything you're doing to help improve people's lives.
I really appreciate that. And if anyone wants to listen to my show, simply go to jamesmillerlifeology.com, and you can find everything about me on social media at James Miller Lifeology. Reach out to me on Instagram. And yes, the book pre-sales May 31st to June 13th on Amazon. Anytime after June 14th, buy in your favorite bookstore. And Life Lessons, You Are the Expert on Your Life by James Miller.
And we'll have all your contact information on our post as well. So,
Perfect. Thank you so much. I
all
appreciate
right,
it.
my friend. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it very much.